definitions are agreements.
Exactly. That's it. That's the keynote.
They're facts. When someone says, well, you're using the wrong definition. No, I'm not. Because there isn't a right definition, right? We didn't get definitions from angels. We didn't go and find E.T. forcing us to use the words. Like, there's nothing in nature that will tell me what the definition is. The definition is a convention. And if you're not willing to come together with someone and find a shared definition, then you can't actually share ideas.
And let's give a really easy example of that right now. Cannibal Troll, as one word, right? Me and you have to find agreement on what that means. If I think it means you're going out and identifying trolls within society and eating them in your basement, then that's a big issue. But what I know because of the agreement we've reached is that Cannibal Troll is identifying trolls for moral standards, correcting them, and being able to do these things to try to better the moral system. So there's a completely different, because of the agreement we reach on what the word actually means. And that goes with every word. You have to find agreement on what you're talking about before you can actually talk about it.
Well, and the funny thing is, cannibal trolling, like, I don't really hunt trolls. And this is something we've been doing in this group for years, from the get-go. And this is something that I discovered in a backhanded way years ago. If you assert proper standards, certain people will identify you as a target and go after you.
Yeah.
And if you don't engage the fight, if you don't actually get aggressive with them, if you follow up on trying to understand what they mean, and if you follow up on what are the grounds for what you mean, and if they're just being aggressive and full of shit, then what becomes obvious is that they're aggressive and full of shit.
Yeah.
If you don't engage the fight to indulge their diversion, then they just look like an asshole.
Sometimes
and that's what pisses them off. And all of a sudden, guess who's the troll?
Yeah. Well,
I'm the troll because they ended up looking like an idiot with me. Well, whose fucking fault was it that you look like an idiot?
And that's that projection that a troll puts up. It's always this is. One of the
hold on. Jeremiah says if you can control the words, you can eliminate concepts. That's absolutely true. That's something that George Orwell talked about.
Yeah. Well,
and that's a good reason for not letting people control the words and definitions.
Yeah.
The only time that I will sometimes assert my right to a definition is when there's no other word for talking about an idea.
Well, and here's the thing about asserting your definition on something is, if you're proposing the concept, right, and you're defining what that is, whether they agree with you or not, they have to agree with the definition you're putting forth to be able to explain that concept, right? That's the only way to.
If we're not willing to let people use their words their own way, then you're not really listening.
Exactly.
You can't really expect to hear a message if you won't even let people have their own meanings. And everybody, a meaning is a verb. When you say a word has a meaning, you're off base. No, a word doesn't have a meaning. A word is just a sound we make with our mouth. And in mind, we have a particular idea that we associate with that sound. And if two people associate the same idea with that sound, then they're using a word. A word is an industrial tool. It takes two people to work with a word. Now, I can, obviously I can write stuff. I can work with words all by myself. But until I go and read it again later to myself or somebody else reads it, there's not really any communication going on.
Yep.
There has to be two parties for a word to work at all.
Yeah. Well, and when you brought up how at the end of a troll will start calling you a troll for calling their bullshit. Basically, a lot of times you can get a troll to tell on themselves by just trying to explain their own concepts, right? Because they have. Go ahead.
That's the trivium. It's a very old school idea for the liberal. It's the basis for the university system. It's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar means using our words in a clear way. Logic means not contradicting ourselves, and rhetoric means being persuasive, which in the modern world is supposed to mean having evidence. Obviously, the world of sales and education, there's lots of other things that go on that convince people to believe things that aren't based on evidence. But the basic idea is If you use your words clearly, and if you don't contradict yourselves, and if you connect your words to our shared reality, then you're communicating and have something worthwhile to communicate. And where you fall down on that it can tell us a lot. But cannibal trolling ultimately comes back to follow up on those three things. And if someone gets pissed off, they're the troll. And if you keep following up, they get pissed off. And now they've lost the game, haven't they?
Yeah. And the game being, they want to control the flow of information. And what a good way, I would say, on a major scale, when you see on either Twitter or mainstream media where a major news anchor like Rachel Maddow or or that person on E-Entertainment that they call a news person, and then on Twitter, the social justice, they try to actually tell other people what they meant when they said something, right? You see that a lot. And then what they do is they say, this is what you meant. And even if you didn't know it.
There was that bit on that Jordan Peterson interview. So what you're saying is,
yeah.
No, that's not what I'm fucking saying.
Yeah.
What I said was the words I said, and if you can't answer those, you're bullshitting.
And that's a great. We should link that interview.
Very often when I'm cannibal trolling, I will use those rhetorical games against people. So what you're saying is, okay, so what you're saying is you're going to lie pathologically now. No, that's not what I'm saying. Yeah, it is actually. So what you're saying means, so what you're saying is I'm lying.
When you start with, so what you're saying to a person, this is an important distinction where I feel like...
the next thing that's going to happen is they're going to lie.
Well, and so there's two... You're absolutely right. And this is an important distinction for people who aren't because there's some people who truly want to have good discussions, but they've fallen into these pattern of behaviors. And and this is a good place to be able to say, if you catch yourself saying regularly, so what you're saying is, and then put your own spin on it, that's a pattern of behavior you fall into. What you should be trying to do...
And that you can discipline yourself. Absolutely.
Correct.
If you find yourself falling into those dumb patterns, you can discipline yourself not to do that anymore. Jeremiah says, hey, here's a big question. What about objective truth? And that actually connects up to what Simon says. All evidence is feelings-based because our senses are feelings. And that's two sides. There's communication using our words to connect up to each other. But then our senses are also a type of communication. Our bodies feel things, we feel impacts from the outside world, and then we can discuss those impacts. There's the experience.
That's it, yeah.
And then there's the analysis and communication of the experience. Words are really just about the communication between each other, which is distinct from the physical communication between us and the world. And that physical communication also works two ways. There's not just the sensations, but there's also our hands and our voices that affect the world in the other direction.
A good way, I've been having this exact, what Jeremiah just asked, discussion with the objective truth component. A lot of times in a discussion, what you truly have is two perspective understandings that are never going to be fully aligned, but what exists outside of either perspective understanding is the objective impact. And you'll find politicians specifically, will try to talk about their perspective understanding to avoid discussing the objective impact of the policy. So you'll see a good example. You'll see Democrats avoid the economy discussion by trying to change it to their perspective that it's Obama's economy. So instead of talking about the actual impact of what's happening right now, they'll try to turn it to their perspective understanding of how it got there, and to avoid where it's actually at, and having that discussion.
We'll talk about the history of how it got there, because we don't really want to talk about the policies that might affect it in our
or just the policies currently in existence, which is also causing it to be there. It's like that's something that, and so they'll try to shift it from, okay, but the policies in play for 4 years now have resulted in this being at 3.5%. I don't care what you think the understanding is on 10 years ago. Can you truly sit here and not acknowledge that the current policies in place are at least maintaining a good level, and they won't have that discussion because they'll change it. So in other words, what you were talking about, the impact, people don't talk about that objective impact enough. They talk more about their perspective understanding of something as opposed to what the objective impact of it is.
Well, and politics is especially bad for that. It ends up being about the personalities and the parties and he said, she said. And what we really want to talk about is the policies and the premises and what the results are going to be. Now, Michael and Jeremiah are talking about dictionaries have been altered. Michael, you're wrong. It's not that the definitions are wrong, because definitions aren't facts. What you mean is people have started using words in new ways, and the dictionaries haven't quite caught up to it. Dictionaries are not cops. Dictionaries do not decide what we mean by words.
Well,
dictionaries are a record of how people have used words, so that if you're not sure what the definition is, you can go to the dictionary and look it up. But no, the dictionary is not in charge of words.
Well, let's give a great example of that right now.
It's going to work that way.
If you type in urbandictionary.com, you're going to see something much different than if you go to Merriam-Webster. And if I go Urban Dictionary and I just say I don't know, lit. Let's just go lit.
Okay.
And when I go to lit for the Urban Dictionary, you have when something is turned up or popping, right? And then if I go to lit on for Merriam-Webster Dictionary, what do I get? Past tense or past participle of light. Sorry, it's loading up now. Yeah, of light. So two completely different things based on the understanding and agreements of those words. Just to underscore the point you're making with, you said Michael or whoever right now, words are agreements. Definitions are fluid. Dictionaries are in fact fluid because over time, different cultures adopt different meanings for different words. So that's just reality. And this is a great discussion since we're having objective reality. It doesn't matter what your understanding is, if it's Michael or whoever. That's just the reality of the situation. You have to come to terms with that.
No, Simon says a request for evidence is often an act of passive aggression, masquerading as inquiry. It can be. That's the idea of sea lioning. When you are faking a discussion, the difference is whether you're willing to hear the evidence. People who won't follow up with evidence, they're hiding something. People who won't hear evidence are also hiding something.
Yeah. What a lot of times you can tell the difference between those two based on context. If someone is and that's where you talked earlier on about motivations being so critical and intent, because if a person explains their point very fluidly and it's a discussion on trying to gain understanding of the opposing concepts, and then the other person just says, what's your evidence for that being able to work? As opposed to having a discussion on, this is my concept of how to improve something, right? Then that person won't hear, he's objecting, he or she is refusing to have a discussion to meet kind of an understanding ground. But what you're talking about is different.
If you're talking about politics, I have this idea for the future. Well, what's your evidence? Well, I don't have evidence for the future.
There you go. Yeah.
I can't tell you what's going to happen. But ultimately, if we try this or we look for similar things that match it,
identifying trends,
we're able to make a judgment or put some odds to it.
Well, this is something that a lot of people struggle with, and on both sides of the political spectrum. To be I guess truthful, it's more obvious with socialists, but it's also true with capitalists. You don't have to just identify patterns as only good. A lot of people will try to find patterns to support future concepts by only citing these good things. You can go back and look at different policies from the bad patterns of impact and address it from that angle. And
science means not just looking at the hits, you also got to look at the misses.
Right. In science, you're a Hall of Famer at much less misses. At much more misses than you are with the Baseball Hall of Famer. And a Baseball Hall of Famer misses 6.5 out of 10 times. They're a Hall of Famer. In science, it's probably even more than that. You can miss 8.5, 9.5 even out of 10 times. If you hit that one, you're a Hall of Famer. And you're looking more at the misses, right, over time with science.
Well, that's not a great example.
Yeah.
Because Hall of Famer in in baseball is someone who does a good job compared to everybody else. Failure in science means cheating. If you cheat, you're out.
Gotcha.
Whereas you can be wrong, and as long as you're honest about being wrong, you're fine.
Yeah.
No, when I say the misses, I mean like in science, when we're looking for data for a hypothesis, we can't just look at psychics love to ignore the misses. Hey, look at all these predictions I got right. Well, yeah, but you got 90% of them wrong. You're not psychic. You're just luck. You're just random.
Yep. Well, sorry, Mike.
Michael says science is anti-faith. Well, yeah, for sure. But faith is immoral, so that's fine. The current high moral system, the current winning moral system, I call Thales' moral system, because he started asking his students 2,500 years ago. He started asking the students, so how do you know? If you have this idea, how do we decide if it's true or not?
Well, I have to disagree, though, that science is anti-faith to begin with, but that's that would have to be a whole other discussion for that component of it. But
well, faith means belief without reason.
To a certain extent, but that's a whole other discussion. If we went in that, I would go way off Cannibal Troll. I just wanted to respond directly to that. But you could even argue that it's two completely separate things that exist that almost have a kinship of sorts, a yoking. But that's a whole other discussion. I won't even go there. Nonetheless,
the root faith that you're talking about is the faith in our ability to understand the world and our faith in our memory. If we can't, and that is a big issue when you talk about memory.
I would say what is versus how to behave, respond, and be within what is. And so you have science for a lot of what is, and then you have faith, reason, capacity for seeking reason, which requires faith to be able to seek more reason. And that exists within almost as a kinship with science. Science tells you what is, and I would say a mix of faith and reason is how you learn to behave within the what is. But that's, again, I will go way too off topic with this if we start hitting there. But
and Jeremiah says faith is belief in what cannot be proven. But that's the thing. Science isn't about proof.
Right.
Science is about disproof. And that's, again, talking about the upside-down moral system. The fact is, certainty, like the word epistemology, means the study of certainty. And the fact is, we can't really be certain.
It's hard to explain the pursuit of new concepts without faith, in my opinion, because to believe there may be a better concept requires an element of faith somewhere in that belief structure. But that's just, again, but that doesn't mean that. So in other words, so for someone to say that science is anti-faith, like Michael did, I disagree wholeheartedly with that, because you have to have faith to pursue new concepts, and science helps you to prove or helps you to disprove over time and gain better understanding of better concepts by disproof. So anyway, a whole other discussion.
Simon says we have no connection to an objective reality. Kinda. The correct way to say that is that the theory of objective reality is an untestable hypothesis. We can't. The idea of an objective universe is not provable. It's not really testable, because we have that faith that all sensations come from that objective reality. So in other words, objective reality is really a communication device.
Yeah.
The truth, that big broad idea of truth, is it's an aid to interpersonal communication. But it's not something that can be proven. And in fact, special relativity tells us that the universe is not a scenario. The universe is not a situation. There's all sorts of ways that the exact same events can be perceived in a different order.
Yeah.
Which means there isn't an objective order to them. So in other words, the universe cannot be pictured. It's not the universe is also not a system. So that there's when you get too broad, our normal analytic techniques fall apart.
And that's where, when you talk about, and at least from a lot of things I've researched on, studied, we kind of get to prime reality, right? There's a discussion on what the prime reality is, right? Is that, would you say that that's where the discussion leads to most? Because we have to have agreements on what the prime reality is and what me and you are observing during this discussion happens to be. If I deny the existence of something within this.
If you start, and this is another type of evasion technique, when you want to talk about a specific event or a specific conclusion, and people try and broaden the thing into,
right.
Well, look, lady, you said that, and that's fucking stupid. I think you're full of shit. She says, well, why do you hate women? Well, what are you talking about? Why do I hate women?
There you go. Perfect example.
What do you shit about that? Like, yeah, because what you said was fucking stupid. Yo, so you hate women. No, I don't hate women because you're not women. You're a woman.
Exactly.
And what you said had nothing to do with your sex. So you're just bullshitting to avoid the fucking point.
I think that that's a great example because a lot of people will kind of make themselves into a more grandiose form to avoid or evade. And so what they do effectively is creating a different reality than what that prime reality in that discussion is. I'm not talking to all women because you don't represent all women in that example. But what the person's doing is creating an alternate, honestly, not true reality to avoid discussing that prime reality.
They're trying to expand the question to avoid the honest question. Right. And that's one of those things that cannibal trolling can deal with. If you can talk in abstract terms, you can capture those techniques and identify them for what they are and shut them down. And we see this circling behavior a lot when someone has some kind of burden for their claim and they want to go talk about everything under the sun. A friend of mine, Heather, calls it pinning people down until they bleed. When someone tries to go off on a tangent, if you identify the crux of their mistake and make them answer for it, they'll often get pissed off. They don't want to be held down. You know, they want to change the question. They want to distract. They want to talk about you. They want to talk about your mom. They want to talk about Trump. They want to talk about the universe and faith. Well, no, the question is, you know, why do you think Mustangs are any good? Mustangs fucking suck.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I'm not a bad person for thinking that your car sucks. All right? So get over it.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up right at about an hour now. 57. What would you say? We'll cap it off here. So basically, the book covers identifying trolls. It covers how to then combat the activity. How would you summarize without giving too much away?
Well, the book I wrote comes in 3 parts. The first part is the basic theory behind cannibal trolling, which is that people are often trying to avoid honest discussions, and if you hold them down and make them perform adequately, they get pissed off. And the more pissed off, and the more pissed off they get, very often the more impaired they get.
Yeah.
Michael Maury is talking about how he's God. No, he's not. That's actually Shirley MacLaine's idea. It's an old Hindu idea that each of us creates the universe. If you define the universe to be the sum of all experiences, then in a very real way, each of us is our own universe. Every life form is its own universe. But no, you're not God, because you're not a solipsist. You can make mistakes. God doesn't make mistakes. And if you think you don't make mistakes, you're full of shit. And we just saw you make a mistake. So
yeah, and I would argue an image of God that's capable of pursuing such, but not.
Right. If you want to say that you're a universe, that's great. I can get behind that. If you want to say you're God, no, you're not.
Yep.
And guess what? God can't be contradicted, and I just contradicted you.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Amen. Amen. That's perfect.
The second part of the book is a bunch of different principles. Things like communication is a negotiation.
Beautiful.
Things like if you are trying to make a sale, you open yourself to a sale. And that's a big part of the cannibal troll theory. When people bring some claim, some theory, some narrative to the table, they're trying to get you to believe it. And if you refuse to believe it, sometimes they get pissed off.
Well,
but you know what? If you can't explain why you believe something, why the hell should I believe it?
Well, and let's give a real. That's a great communication is a negotiation. You find that if you were to call about Thanksgiving dinner with your family, you will start with what's someone else bringing to determine what you're going to bring. Communication is negotiation at all times, right? I mean, that's a good way of, I like how you laid that out there, because even in the small dynamics within family where you have a lot of, shared love or whatever, you'll have those same negotiations taking place just to be able to process of elimination to understand what your responsibility is.
We can't make plans together if we can't communicate. Jeremiah says, does pissing people off accomplish anything? Yes, it scares them away and it makes them impaired. And if someone is going to show up and bullshit me and then get pissed off when I try and follow up, they deserve to get pissed off.
So let me
and that's the other thing about Cannibal Troll theory. When someone wants to bullshit and I follow up, they have three choices.
This is one of my favorite verses from the Bible, and my objective is not to, and I don't think yours is either, is to piss them off. Our objective is to get to whatever they're trying to say as a truthful statement. What pisses them off is their inability to make a truthful statement.
If you're trying to piss somebody off, you're trolling.
Yeah.
If you're trying to understand what they mean and they get pissed off,
they're a troll. They're a troll. And so John 15:18, if the world hates you, know it hated me before it hated you. That's Jesus. Okay? So, in other words, Jesus would just basically get Pharisees to their final thought to a certain extent. He would, respond with questions, respond with statements, respond with scripture to a degree. What off the Pharisee was the fact that they weren't being truthful in any way. They were being a gatekeeper. And in a lot of ways, trolls behave similar to a gatekeeper in the sense that they try to suppress communication, suppress free thought and original thought. And that's a lot of the ways, they try to dictate what words are going to be used, why they're used. This is a lot of bad troll techniques. And that's what Pharisees would do a lot of the time.
Jeremiah asks, isn't your goal to convert or teach them rather than drive away? Well,
sure.
They have three choices. When someone is communicating poorly and I try and give them a hint or try and help them communicate, if they get pissed off, then they don't want to communicate. And if they fuck off because they suck at it, that's fine. That's a fine outcome. If you're going to bullshit and I answer you and you're going to get pissed off and fuck off, oh well. But if you are going to bullshit and I try and get you to straighten your shit out, you also have the option to stop bullshitting and be clear. Jeremiah also asks, what about when we're talking about God, a lot of those experiences are personal experiences. Well, sure. Every experience is personal. When you're trying to communicate, you're trying to share experiences. You're trying to connect with someone. It's the evangelicals, the ones who are trying to get you to change your mind, who start getting off the reservation when they're trying to tell you what your experiences mean. No, that doesn't work. If you're evangelical, the best thing you can do is share your experiences and hope that other people relate to them.
You can
actually jam an idea in someone's head. That doesn't work.
This is exactly so what you're touching on, and I appreciate how the conversation kind of led to here, because this is a common misconception. What you're saying is absolutely true. When you go to Revelation 12:11, let me just pull it up so I have it correct. It talks about what you just said. The best thing going for an evangelical is not to try to project what someone else's experience means for their life. This is exactly what Revelation 12:11 refers to when how a believer triumphs over an evil one, for example, over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. By the word of their. So in other words, by me communicating my testimony is how you triumph, not by trying to project onto you what you mean by your testimony. It never works that way. All you do is push people that way.
Absolutely, and that's the basic idea behind communication. If you're trying to jam a message, you're not communicating, and that's one of the principles. When someone tries to jam a message, if they're not going to hear the correct ideas behind how to communicate that message, then I'm just a jack. And if you get pissed off, so what? You deserve to get pissed off.
So, in my opinion, the way, the dynamics and how we communicate and that matters demonstrably more than who has a right and who has a wrong in any given moment in time. And that's what I think you try to attack with the Cannibal Troll, is getting people to recognize the reality that, look, you're projecting instead of trying to find a common understanding. Is that yeah?
And that's an overarching idea that, and this is my faith, I guess. For a long time, and in our group specifically, but for a long time before that, I kind of took it on as an attitude of mine that I'm going to promulgate proper empirical standards on the theory that if everybody's using proper empirical standards, we'll find the truth.
Yep.
And if you don't have that kind of faith in your fellow man, why even bother?
Well, let me tell you, I truly appreciate that statement, because the end of Proverbs 9:10 says the knowledge of the holy is understanding. Now, you got to think about all the words that can be used there, but trying to understand one another is the most critical thing to gaining new knowledge. When you're projecting the other person's understanding, you're rejecting the ability to grow in knowledge every single time.
You're not giving them the right to have their own mind. It's ridiculous.
Yep. So, I enjoyed this.
Just to finish up what you started before, the third part of the book is all the different tactics. Yeah. There's lots of different rhetorical techniques. Our group, for the longest time, we've had these three missions. The first mission of our group has always been to try and do a better job bringing together the right wing and the left wing. There's been lots of groups over the years that tried to be bipartisan, and almost all of them end up having one party or the other take over and kick everybody else out, and it turns into another echo chamber. From the get-go, our primary mission has been to see if anarchists can do a better job creating a forum where the right wing and the left wing can argue without dominating each other. And of course, that's going back to what we said, where if we have faith that if we create a good forum for communication and assert standards on proper communication, then everybody will have a better chance of reaching the truth. Our second mission has always been what we used to call training trolls, what I now call rehabilitating trolls.
Yeah.
Where we convince them that their communication tactics fucking suck, and if you don't get your shit together, you get shit on, and that's the deal. And you don't have any control over that deal. Like that's, and this is something a lot of people have trouble with, because a lot of people sort of got stuck in these little kid tactics. Well, I'm going to lie and lie and lie, and I'm going to pretend that you can't see me. Well, except we can tell you're lying. I mean, everybody can tell you're lying.
Well, and to a certain extent, most people who are not trained boxers but keep getting in the ring with Mike Tyson and getting punched out eventually learn that their approach is not working. And so that's the goal there.
And that's tit for tat. You know, even the stupid don't like to suffer.
Yeah. Yep.
And so eventually they're going to try something different if they get their shit kicked in enough times. And then the third mission has always been promulgating clever rhetoric that you can use, that other people can use, that anyone can use to defeat these bad communication tactics and help people communicate better. Because that's ultimately, if you don't have that positive intent, you're not really going to get anything.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have some sort of principle, some sort of guiding pattern that you can use to achieve these good outcomes, you're never going to achieve a good outcome.
In a world of electromagnetic waves, be a positive charge when you're pursuing outcomes, right? In other words, that's kind of a joke there. But you mentioned without that positive intent. You want to be positive with the motivations, the intent to be able to. Without that, if you're negative in your route and during the pursuit, you're not going to get anywhere. The intent, no matter what it looks like. So when you're being Mike Tyson to an untrained fighter, the intent is that hopefully they become either better trained, better equipped, or they learn their techniques aren't working, right?
Yes. And Simon, you mentioned the left. That is lazy. That kind of vague pronoun is super lazy. Well, the right thinks this. Who? Who are you talking about, man?
Yeah.
Well, feminists say that. Who? Who said that?
King Philip II of Macedonia is too, but well before then, divide and conquer has always been the strategy. And when you can get people knee-jerking into left and right, you have a clear and decisive division that ultimately makes individuals stop listening to other individuals.
And if you're using those pronouns, and this is a very common thing too, the collective thinking that Simon mentioned, talking in pronouns instead of nouns, that's just avoiding those definitions. It's avoiding your clear chance to make your terms make sense.
Yeah.
Jeremiah said he challenged me to a fist fight. Believe it or not, I've seen people challenge each other to fist fights, and that's similar to a wagering technique that I use. Very often, if you challenge people to a wager, or if you challenge them to a fist fight, to make them stand up for their ideas, they won't.
Yeah.
Like someone says, well, I bet you've never been there. Yeah. How much you want to bet? What do you mean? Well, I mean, you just said I bet, so I mean, you want to bet $50 or? Well, no, I don't really want to put money behind it. Yeah, because you're full of shit. That's why.
Well,
the movie The Christmas Story has the same sort of thing. Well, if you stick your tongue on that pipe, it's not going to stick. Okay, so go do it. Well, I'm not going to go do it. Well, why not? Just go. I mean, if it's not going to stick, prove it. Well, I don't want to do that. Yeah, because you know it'll fucking stick.
Yep.
Right. You want to put your actions behind your words. Guess how much your words matter.
Yep. And let's get to a wrap up. I'm sorry, my wife just called in, so she's probably on her way home with the kiddos. Probably wrap up here. But let's put a link to the book in the comments.
I did.
Oh, awesome. And then do you want to wrap up with any kind of closing thought?
Sure. Jeremiah mentions the fist fight. I didn't do this. I picked this up from somebody else, where someone said, well, I'll tell you what, you pick a charity and I'll pick a charity and we'll duke it out in public, and the winner's charity gets the ticket money. How's that? That's fair.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and as long as it's a symmetrical contest, as long as everybody agrees to the deal ahead of time, as long as everybody agrees on what the outcome means, then why not? If that's, if you're that pissed off that you want to beat up on someone to make your point, then, maybe you should try it and see who you can convince.
Yep.
But yeah, if your actions and your words don't match up, guess what the smart people are going to pay attention to?
Yeah. Well, that's, at some point it all goes back to actions always convey more than words, right? And I mean, sometimes the simplest truths are the most obvious. So.
It's true.
Well, no, let's do this again very, very soon. It's good to be back on one of these. I think we had some good engagement. So let's keep it going. Maybe another one this week on continuing Paul's descent or something, Cannibal Troll Part 2. Either way. So.
Well, yeah, for sure. I appreciate it, man.
Yep.
Have yourself a good day. Thanks very much for the interview, and thanks everyone for joining.
Yep, sounds good. Yep, see you everyone. Bye.
Awesome.